The opinions and views expressed in the following presentation do not necessarily reflect those of GameCon Radio or its affiliates.
Banshee's Lair, Visionary Talk Radio on GameConRadio.com. We rock your world.
We're on. Good evening and welcome to Mo Banshee's Lair, Visionary Talk Radio on GameCon Radio. I want to welcome people in the chat and people listening on, the radio and all of that. Welcome, welcome. I just want to point out that we, on GameCon Radio, there is music 24/7. No matter what time of day you come, there will be music playing and a little buffer clearing up. Okay. And we have a schedule page. And on the schedule page, you can find a list of great shows that are on. And you really, if you have a special thing you like, you're going to find it. And on Saturday nights, Dr. Lester has one of my favorite shows. It's classic radio shows from way back when. And they're murder mysteries, and they star all the greats. Vincent Price, all of the big actors of the time did these radio shows, these mysteries, The Shadow Knows, all of this. And so please check out the schedule show, and I'm sure you're going to really love what you find there. I'm having some trouble. There it is. I have some sad news, and a lot of people don't remember Kitty Wells. Kitty Wells was the lady of country music. She was before Loretta Lynn. She was one of the original country queens of music. She passed away yesterday at the age of 92. And Teddy and I, one of the first times we went out together was to a little roadhouse down by Lakehurst Experimental Base. And there was Kitty Wells performing live. And I remember in the show, they had sold so many tickets, and she started looking around, and she became upset that some of the people were not getting a clear view of the stage, and she wouldn't perform until they started moving chairs and tables so that everybody got a really good look at her. And what a show she put on. She broke out in 1952 with a song, It Wasn't God Who Made Honky Tonk Angels. And she didn't write it, but the reason she recorded it was because there was a song out by a male country artist who blamed a honky-tonk angel for destroying his marriage and stuff. So in retaliation, she did a very bold thing and recorded It Wasn't God Who Made Honky-Tonk Angels and kind of put him right where he belongs. So we're going to do a little tribute to her tonight, and during our first break, we will be playing It Wasn't God Who Made Honky-Tonk Angels. Then we have a kind of funny bit by Spanky and Our Gang, which was a 60s group called Commercial. I think you're all going to like it. And the reason I picked that is this is going to be a very dark subject. So we want to keep it a little lighter so everybody enjoys it. So if for nothing else, hang around for the commercial because you're really going to enjoy it. And then Murder by Numbers by Police and Yesterday's Rain by Spanky and the Gang. So they're the music tonight, and I picked it specifically to kind of lighten the mood and that. Crazy but news, you know that, I'm going to do it, so just brace yourselves. Remember the two kids that it was all over YouTube? They were doing that Miami zombie attack prank. And they were dressing like zombies and attacking people and scaring the daylights out of them. Well, they decided to try another one. Jonathan Bangus, 20, evidently he tried to play a fake bomb hoax thing on this guy, and the guy did not take it well. He called it Russian hitman prank. It went really wrong, and the guy that they were trying to scare, because they just picked random people out, he evidently beat the daylights out of them, and I say good. Now, this 20-year-old said that he apologized to this Mr. Brown, who was 51, who got told he had a pipe bomb in his car and everything. But Mr. Brown didn't accept it, and the kid is complaining. He attacked me and my camera guy. He threw me on the floor. Then he threw my guy on the floor. I was just screaming back, "I'm sorry." Maybe you shouldn't do nasty things like that. If you don't do stupid things like that, maybe you won't get beat up by 51-year-old people. Good for them. I'm glad they got a little bit of their own back. Florida Pizza Hut was robbed. A very stocky, barefoot guy in a ball cap broke into a Pizza Hut, smashing the window, and on the camera they could see he was looking for cash. He didn't find any, so he went into the refrigerator and stole a few boxes of shredded cheese. Well, at least he can sell it or eat it or something. I guess that the thing was he needed food or he needed money for food. So if they didn't have money, he got food. But those are two things that happened in Florida this week. I found this, and I know we have a lot of people out in the country who listen to us. Ben Van Loon is a dairy cow farmer out in Wisconsin, Van Loon Dairy Farm. He has been ordering water beds for his cows to rest on. And the reason he said he's doing it is because straw and like wood shavings and all breed bacteria, and then a cow goes down and is down for a few weeks or maybe even a few months. And he says this way they don't get as much bacteria on them, and they're happier. Their aches and their pains, they're sitting on this water bed, which is not filled like a traditional water bed. It only has, maybe an inch or two of water. But the thing is, it takes a little bit of the oomph out of the ground and impact. So he's a brilliant young man. He and his brothers came up with this, and they're very young. They look to be between 20 and 30, the group of them. So kudos to them for being entrepreneurs and thinking this up. Fort Wayne, Indiana, a father has pleaded guilty to 4 charges related to an incident in which he strapped 4 kids to his hood of his car. The Journal Gazette out there reported 29-year-old Aaron Stefanski pleaded guilty to 3 counts of child neglect and driving while intoxicated. He said he used yellow toe straps and secured 4 children, 3 of them are his own, to the hood of a white sedan and drove them around. And when he got stopped, he said he was only going to drive around the corner. If you've got to use a toe strap to restrain anybody, it's probably not a good idea. So he's probably going to go to jail for a few years, and the children have been released to family members. I think he needs to reassess his what's a good time. Buy him a swing, guy. Get them a swing, get them a sliding pond, strap him into the car. Take him to Great Adventure, for God's sake. Take him to Six Flags. People never cease to amaze me on how stupid they are. I want to remind everybody, and I do this every week, and I'm starting to feel like, a prophet in the wilderness. This is our fourth heat wave this summer coming down, and it's not backing off without a fight. So if you are going to do gardening, if you're going to do yard work, if you're going to try to walk, that kind of thing, the best time to do it is early in the morning or late in the evening when it's cooler. Early in the morning, you have the advantage of it being cooler and the temperature dropping during the morning, whereas in the evening, I find we're still everything is hot. The pavement's hot, the ground's hot, even though the sun's going down, everything is still hot. So I like to do that kind of thing in the morning. But also, please remember to keep hydrated, always rehydrate. And alcohol is a very bad thing when the temperatures are high. And when you're stuck out in the cold, alcohol is no good. High sugar drinks are not a good thing. These things deplete your body of water, and you got to keep replacing your water. So energy drinks, a lot of water. Make sure you're checking the elderly, animals, children. Make sure everybody is safe. A lot of towns are opening cooling stations, but a lot of towns have libraries with air conditioning. They're open from like 9 in the morning till 9 at night. You can go sit in there and, relax and read a book and cool off. Also, but you have to be safe, a cool bathtub of water. You fill the tub up with water, go sit in it for a little while, cool down. Close the door so children and pets are not going to get in there and you're not going to have an accident. Go back in when you start getting very heated up. And fans really do help air conditioners work more efficiently. You put a fan on, it rotates the air so the cooling air doesn't just stay in one direction. So it maximizes your air conditioning. Please, we all want to make it through these heat waves. We all want to make sure everybody is safe. And I'm reading a lot about people saying they see animals locked in cars and they want to break the windows open and this and that. And the next thing, if you see an animal in the car alone in the heat, I don't care if it's in the shade or not, call the police and report it. The police will open the door up, they will find out where the owner is, and they will take care of everything. You don't have to go to jail, you don't have to get in trouble. So that's my thing for today. I hope everybody tries to stay cool and all of that. Our guest tonight is Jeff Mudgett, who has he has a dubious honor of having a pedigree that I don't think anybody in the world would want. He has discovered he is the great-great-grandson of H.H. Holmes, Herman Mudgett, who built the hotel during the Chicago's World's Fair in 1993, and it became known as the murder capital of Chicago, or the murder castle of Chicago. Jeff, welcome to the Lair.
Well, thank you, Mo. It's an honor, and I've been looking forward to it all week. Sorry, did I say 1993? Sorry, 1893. There's so much to ask, and you've done a lot of, trying to explain things. And one thing about sociopaths or psychopaths, whatever you choose to call them, is they show no remorse, they show no empathy for others, and they're not necessarily they're not necessarily crazy in the clinical sense. They're more evil. Would you agree with that? Well said. My great-great-grandfather, Herman Mudgett, H.H. Holmes, was not crazy in the least. He was a genius, a brilliant man who enjoyed murder.
One of the things, Mo, I've set out as a goal in writing the book and doing the shows like this and talks is that I'd like to see us redefine how we attach labels to men like him with these psychopath and sociopath names, which don't do a very good job of defining or describing, a monster like this. This man was evil. He enjoyed what he did. He had a choice, and he chose the path we all would consider the dark one every single time.
Let's just back up, and you explain in your words who he was. H.H.
Well, he was right. He grew up. He was born Herman Webster Mudgett in New Hampshire, Wilmington, New Hampshire. He had a nice family. There was no childhood rapes or any of those things.
And they weren't necessarily rich, but they were well off.
They fed him well. He had clothes. He went to good schools. Those type of things. He wasn't lacking. He married a beautiful young lady who also family had money. They had a child, which was my great-grandfather. He grew bored with his life and went to the University of Michigan Medical School, where he was top of his class. I always people think, why would someone like that go to medical school when those schools are for curing ill and sickness and decreasing pain? I always think he went to those places to enable him to increase all those things instead.
Right.
He knew exactly what he was doing, Mo, when he went to medical school, and he enjoyed working on the cadavers. He enjoyed the lessons and the teachings that he knew would enable him to exceed at his chosen profession in life.
Right. He was perfecting it.
Exactly, and when you really think of it, and we'll get into it later, how I'll prove how he used those techniques and skills that he learned at medical school with the knife and the scalpel. Mm-hmm. When you think of it, it's exactly the right place for a man with his desires to have gone.
Yeah, and the thing that is so disturbing with this case is that for years, he was a con man, and he did stuff, he pissed people off, but the society was unaware of anything he was doing until he got nailed in Philadelphia for the swindle, right? Fraud.
Well, we're jumping a little ahead, but you're right. He was arrested for a life insurance fraud, which led the police into a murder of 3 small children in Indiana and Toronto.
But until then, he was. Everybody thought he was okay. He's just a weirdo, right?
No. I mean, this was the local doctor. The neighborhood loved having this doctor in the neighborhood who would greet them on their way home from work and school, and they thought they were all lucky, Mo, to have him there next to them. And lo and behold, beneath his hotel in Chicago was a factory for murder and death.
Right, and that, I guess, is the thing that stuns me about this whole thing, is that, he was able to keep control of it, and not really until the end it unraveled, and it was through, laziness or not anything, but he ended up moving to Chicago and working for a pharmacist, and then how did that go about that he ended up buying this?
Well, he went to work for a couple, an older couple, who soon after he arrived working for him, they thought they had found gold. When he walked in the door, here was a licensed physician who wanted to work in their pharmacy. soon after he arrived, Mo, the husband was found ill. It grew serious, and he died, coincidentally. You and I both know there was no coincidence to it.
I was just thinking, yeah, right.
Right. There was nothing coincidental about it. Then, as he did throughout his life, he had a Svengali power over women. The surviving wife soon redid her will and trust to include his name for her property and the pharmacy and their other property surrounding it. And lo and behold, she soon died, and he became the owner.
Right, and then he built this across the street, the Chicago hotel, the World's Fair Hotel, right? And that's what everybody came to find out was the murder castle, right?
Exactly, and we're talking about one of the fascinating subjects about this story, which amazes me hasn't been researched more by criminologists, is this is the definition of premeditation. Now, here's a man who figured out where the World's Fair was going to be 4 or 5 years ahead of time. Mm-hmm. Found out the property, which was at the junction for all the transportation systems, which would feed the millions into this World's Fair. Discovered a way that his licensed profession could enable him to own this property. Then set out designing and constructing this hotel and basement with torture chambers, the factory for death, the way he could turn human bodies into profit, and had it built in time so that it was ready before the fair opened. And when those doors opened up, when the fair opened up to the world, and when 20, 30 million people flooded into Chicago, without the system at that time having any way of keeping track of these visitors, tourists, he was prepared to create, well, maybe the most horrible situation and scene that mankind, I get into debates all the time about Hitler and Auschwitz and those things. Obviously, the numbers don't compete.
Right.
But here's a man that didn't have a uniform ordering soldiers to do his murder. He was doing it himself with his own hands. Hundreds,
and he
maybe
was...
even 1,000 people, and here he was, and he set this whole thing up so that it was ready to go. I mean, to repeat myself, it is the definition of premeditation.
Yeah, he also lucked out because he was smart enough to drive all the workers crazy so that they wouldn't stay long, and nobody could compare notes and say, what the heck is he building here?
Yeah, there was nothing lucky about that. That was pure brilliance. He knew that if one of the contractors stayed too long, they would know too much about what they were building, and he would have trouble with the police eventually. So he just kept funneling more and more through, and he would have arguments, fights over bills, over construction, over design. And he was famous in the neighborhood at the time for being very difficult to work for.
We have a question, and when they come up in the chat room, I have to ask them before I lose them because the chat moves fast sometimes. And this is coming from England. Spooky UK is asking, may I ask if the guest changed his name to Mudgett? I only ask because I thought Herman Mudgett only had one child, a daughter called Lucy, and when married, she would have changed her name. Let's just back up a bit. You found out at a family dinner who he was, right? When you were 20 years old?
When I was about 40. Yeah,
oh, okay.
And, this question, the question your caller has it all wrong. My great grandfather had a son who had a son who had a son who had me.
He was married 3 times.
That's all verified. That's all been proven by genealogy studies. There's no doubt whatsoever.
Oh, you're so lucky, right? Oh, fortunate you. There's no mistakes. You have it all laying on your shoulders.
You know, I tell you what, I don't look at it like that. My family, for over 100 years, ran away from the stigma that was being a Mudgett at the time. And at the time, they could all move west to California from Chicago and New Hampshire to get away from. It was the O.J. Simpson trial at the time. It covered the country in the papers, maybe even Europe and London, those places. I'm not sure, but every serious reporter at the time was covering the trial of H.H. Holmes. Mm-hmm. And when he was quote unquote executed, the family moved to California. And my grandfather, Herman's grandson, took up working for Pacific Gas and Electric, the state power system, and had a long, fruitful career there, which he would have been happy keeping a secret from the family. He was the only one that knew. My grandmother didn't even know. She wouldn't have married my grandfather had she known.
Right.
And it all came out at a, like you said, at a dinner party when I was about 40 years old.
Okay, so let me ask a question. This all comes spilling out, and then you get 2 boxes that were bequeathed to you, but the instructions were not to give them to you until your grandmother passed away. So your grandfather absolutely did not want her to know where he had come from. And let's face it, most people, when you say, do you know who H.H. Holmes were, unless they're into, anomalous or murder mysteries and stuff, a lot of people have no clue who it is. And then they look it up and then they learn about it. So you get these boxes from your father and says, well, he wanted you to have it. What was in these boxes?
Well, my grandfather, as you know, loved to fish. Most of some of the first of the book is my describing the hatred I developed as a young boy for my grandfather, simply because the man would never take me fishing. What I didn't know at the time was fishing was where he went to get away from the pressure of who he was and the psychological aspects of his life, which over the course of the book I described, and I actually learned myself. When I started, it was after he was passed away, but I learned to love my grandfather. But in any case, when he died, he was a wealthy man, and he, in his will, he left me these 2 tackle boxes that contained his fishing lures and reels and lines, equipment for fishing for trout and striped bass in California. Well, I wasn't interested in them much. I was an older man, and they sat in my garage for a while. And then the story is about what I found when I opened these boxes up,
right? And
learned that there was material from my great-great-grandfather that he had given to my grandfather, who had passed it on to me, and it was things that the world had never seen about the killer.
Mm-hmm. They were letters, correspondence type things?
Yeah, there were material written by the killer himself, describing his life, and in such a way which may have been somewhat different from what had been written about him before. And that's what the story, my book Bloodstains, is all about, how you go about living your life once you find out that this most evil man that ever lived was your great-great-grandfather, and left you materials that the world had never seen before. And I just try to describe those materials in the book, and the obsession that I developed, trying to determine what in them was true and what in them was fabricated, because not only was this man the most prolific serial killer who ever lived, he was also the most prolific liar that ever lived.
Yeah.
And anything he wrote, anything that was written by a reporter who interviewed him on the cover of the New York Times or the Chicago papers, any of those, anything that was said from this man I learned was probably a lie.
Okay, we have to go to break, and again, we're going to do a song after the commercials in remembrance of Kitty Wells, who passed away yesterday at the age of 92. She was the queen of country music. She was there before Loretta Lynn and all of them. She started very much started female country music artists, and we're going to be right back with Jeff Mudgett. We're going to be taking questions and all that, and we're going to be talking a lot about this effect and dealing with finding out that your great-great-grandfather was probably one of America's most prolific serial killers. We'll be right back. This is GameCon Radio, rocking your world.
This is Michelle Tomlinson, the Scream Queen, and I listen to GameCon Radio. Why? Because it rocks.
Welcome back to Mo Banshee's Lair, Visionary Talk Radio on GameConRadio.com. Jeff Mudgett has written a book called Bloodstains. It is a paperback, and you can buy it on as a Kindle edition, and it's on Amazon.com. If you search for books, Bloodstains, it's going to come right up. And this is the book that has kind of reignited the whole story of one of America's most prolific serial killers. The story is a bit grim, and we definitely, I'm telling you, I read this book. I mean, you're going to enjoy it. So let me say that you described the book as a psychological thriller based on real facts, right?
It's based on a true story. That's right. I took some poetic license in areas that obviously we're talking about a 120-year mystery of a man who played chess his whole life, made fools of any police departments he ever dealt with. I needed some areas of conjecture and imagination filling in the gaps, and rather than do what a lot of authors do now, Mo, and just say, "Oh, it's nonfiction," I just decided, my lawyers and I decided, let's just say based on a true story. Let's let the readers decide where they want to go with the story. Then we'll go about later and prove these facts through excavation and exhumations of graves, and come out the other end, rather than do the what I call lies that a lot of authors are doing these days.
Yeah, because, it's like the Da Vinci Code. When people read that, right in the beginning, in the foreword, he says that he took a bunch of historical events and wove a story about it. Yet people will stand there and say, yes, this is proof that Christ, Mary was pregnant and went to Normandy in France. They got her, and right in the beginning he says, I just took facts and I made a story out of it. You're kind of protecting yourself a little bit because you're going to need money to do, and we're going to be talking about this disinterment of your great-great-grandfather. You find out all this information, and you decided to write a book. Was that the first thought, or did you just say, I got to find out more about it?
Mo, what happened was I started hearing stories about authors gearing up with books that they were excited about. Then we saw The Devil in the White City come out and sell, millions of copies. Here's the guy that was top of the New York Times bestseller list with this book about Holmes. With some, he did a great job. He's a great writer. The story's good. There are some things in there I disagree with, but that's any book. Then we started hearing about Warner Brothers going to do their biggest blockbuster in decades, starring Leonardo DiCaprio as Holmes. And I, having, more material than all these people had, I decided rather than to sit back as my family had for 100 years and run away from the story, I decided to write it myself and maybe get closer to telling a better story about what this man was, what my family was, and how my family went on and became good, law-abiding citizens, even war heroes in America, despite having these genes. I wanted to tell the story myself, Mo.
Right. And how did your family feel about this? Because I got to tell you, as a mother, if my husband came and said, by the way, I found out my great-great-grandfather is Holmes, the serial murderer of the Chicago World's Fair in 1893, whatever, and I would sit there and say, and don't you open your mouth about it. How did your family take this?
Well, before, I'm going to get right to that, but I want to tell you, and I want to tell all your listeners, I'm proud to have written this story about this man, and I'm proud to tell the real story. But getting to your point, when I first let the family know, and they knew me, and they knew this was, they weren't going to change my mind. That's the type of person I am. They knew that wasn't going to do anything, but They were largely upset. My mother is one of the great mothers of all time. She would have supported me no matter what I did. My father was upset, did not want me to do it. My brother and my sister were, my sister's still upset about it. But there was a period of time there, a year, 2 years, where we weren't, the family wasn't talking much with me. That has all changed now. They see where the story went. They see the acclaim I'm receiving from having told this story to the world. They see the pats on the backs I'm receiving from people like you or people on all the radio shows I go on and get interviewed with. There is no stigma attached to me. I haven't had one person come up to me and say, you're some kind of ugly thing because of who you were born to. None of that's ever occurred. As a matter of fact, it's all been for the good. And now my family is, besides my sister, is 100% behind me.
Right. Is it safe to say you became obsessed with this? That
happened, and that's you've read the book. You see that's the development of the story. How this quest for knowledge to learn the truth. I don't know what it is about human beings, Mo. It's something very common in all of us. When you're driven, when you have this thing inside you that can't stop, when you're not going to quit on a project that you have in your mind, all of us will develop an obsession from that. I don't know what it is, I don't know why, but we're all the same on that. We all have that. That obsession can go over the top if you're not very careful. And as I described in my story, that mine went over the top, and that obsession soon became a health issue and even a struggle for survival at the very end. And that's one of the things I wanted to explain in the book, not so much how many people Herman Mudgett killed with his scalpel in the basement of the murder castle, but more how we all would react if a reader was suddenly in my shoes and had found out what I did, and having gone out and trying to find the truth, been introduced to what I thought was the devil.
Right.
And how we deal with that. And that's what I wanted the book to be about, and that's what I want your listeners to pick up if they decide to read my book, is it's about them. It's about what happens to them when they find themselves in my shoes.
We have another question, which is perfect timing for us right now, again from England. Am I right in thinking he was not seen for 5 years after medical school, eventually showing up in Wilmot, Illinois in 1885, posing as an inventor, If that's right, do you know where he was and what he was doing during the time he was missing? Unaccounted for.
First time I've ever heard those facts. I'd be speculating completely. I have no knowledge of a 5-year gap.
Mm-hmm.
The man loved being social. He was with people all the time. I seriously doubt he could have gone and done a Robinson Crusoe for 5 years on some desert island.
Yeah, because 1885 was after the Chicago World's Fair. During the fair, he was running the murder castle, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And what's happening is Mo, is we get as more and more information develops about the possibility that he is also Jack the Ripper, we get a lot of animosity, especially from London and England, about the facts, trying to prove that it wasn't possible because of the time frame in 1888 and the summer of 1888 and fall. And that's what comes out a lot on these questions from England and London. And I don't mind them. I just don't know where they get some of these facts.
Well,
and,
they're just reading the internet and researching what they can. So I'm assuming, and maybe this is a large assume, ask you and me, but I'm assuming that something in these artifacts that were bequeathed to you, and I don't know, have you ever figured out why he bequeathed these things to you, your grandfather?
My grandfather?
Yeah.
And that's if you understand, I describe it in the book. How the story describes my name being in these documents and the impossibility that was, unless this man had lived past when he was supposedly executed.
Right.
And that's what the story's about, and how whether these genes that I was born with has something to do with destiny and being evil as well. And I don't want to get too far into that, Mo, because that's what the whole book's about.
But it's about.
Yeah, that's why I was given that material.
But that material was a direct reason why you believe that, I guess, possibly while the hotel was being built, he was traveling back and forth to England, right? At the time of the Ripper murders.
Exactly. The man was fabulously wealthy. He was making $300,000 or $400,000 during this period of time, which I've never worked out what that equates to now, but we're talking serious money. And there's this, I don't know why, there's this thing that people can't get over about how difficult it was to cross the Atlantic Ocean. It wasn't. They were doing it in 7 or 8 days on luxury liners at the time. And Holmes had incredible amounts of money. He could have handed cash over and taken a ride. We have some evidence coming out about him being a passenger on a liner that arrived in Southampton 8 days before the first Ripper murder, and we have the passenger list. So all those things were put together with the help of some very talented forensic investigators, and the world's going to be amazed.
Since we're on the topic of the Ripper murders, you also have had a forensic examination of the letters that you have and journals, and you have had an expert compare them to the boss letters from Jack the Ripper, and they said, in their opinion, the same person wrote them.
You know, that's one of the most amazing things about the story, Mo. Every day I receive new information from somewhere around the world. That stuff, that material that you just very ably described, came to me the summer after I first published the book from a gentleman, I won't put his name out over the air, but who was his hobby was trying to prove that Holmes had been Jack the Ripper. He believed it 10 years before I wrote the book.
Mm-hmm.
He had taken the handwritten notes that Holmes had written for the reporters in the jail cell while he was awaiting execution, and he had delivered them to the British Library, who had given him the name of an expert that they used for handwriting comparisons, who, when she compared these handwritten notes, which are verifiable, absolutely, with the Dear Boss and the From Hell Jack the Ripper letters, she came out, and I have her opinion and conclusion in a written letter, stating that there is no doubt that it is the same hand.
Right.
Well, as you know, proving the letters are the same hand does not prove that he is Jack the Ripper.
Right.
It does prove that he was there, that he had knowledge of the murders past what you could obtain just reading a newspaper in London. So now we're talking about a prolific serial killer who had, we can prove was there, that had a knowledge beyond what the normal man had. So I knew that the Supreme Court had about 7 or 8 years ago, maybe 10 now, had said that handwriting and expert conclusions were not enough to put a man away. You could have an expert say yes, you could have an expert say no. It wasn't enough, and they had disallowed it in criminal cases. So the Department of Justice and the Post Office had hired a firm at the University of Buffalo who did a computer program that was going to monitor handwriting comparisons, and this computer would send millions of points to each letter. I contacted them. I gave them the handwritten notes and I told them about the Dear Boss and the From Hell letter. Everybody can pick those up. And they ran those documents through their computer, and it came up with a 97% number. So there is very little doubt that some of the letters are the same handwriting as was written by Holmes in his jail cell. So that part of it is, you'll always get someone to argue against, but now we're getting to numbers, 97% numbers, which are very difficult for a reasonable person to disagree with for very long.
Yeah, and they're chatting about it in the chat, which I'm trying to follow and still hold a sensible conversation. And there's only 2 point something that it says that it's not a match on the handwriting. It was 97 point something. And so, yeah, the case is 100 years old, and you could have a handwritten confession staring you in the face, but it's really hard to just nail it down and have everybody agree that that's who did it, because these murderers have taken on a persona. They are legends. Whether we like it or not, they, in their macabre way, have become legends, and a lot of people don't like legends played with. Everybody wants to think that Jack the Ripper was an English person. I don't know why, and then Americans want to believe that Holmes was an American. It's crazy how people who follow this stuff refuse to entertain the idea that they might have actually been one and the same. And I asked you last night about your opinion is that he survived the hanging, and one of my fascinations has been the 1929 murders in Chicago, which were very much like what he was doing. Elliot Ness had been called in to find out who was killing homeless people and just discarding their mutilated bodies. And he, in the end, said he knew who did it, but they were in a institution and he was told to back off. But if what you believe that your great-great-grandfather somehow cheated death and was still out there, these guys go home to their hunting grounds, places where they're comfortable. And see, I know a lot of people wouldn't make that connection, but you and I talked about it last night. What do you think?
When you brought that up, I had never heard that before. I did a little research after we got off the phone, and I was surprised to see that the MO that you were talking about was very similar to a lot of Holmes' killings. I don't know enough about it to give you an educated opinion, but I think it's something very fascinating for someone to dig further into. The great thing about, and this is one of the most exciting things about my story, is that these things that I'm speculating about, these things that I'm putting together based on the evidence I have, are all provable sooner or later. It's like when I explain to you, when someone comes up to me and goes, Mudgett, you're crazy. How can your great-great-grandfather have not been hanged that day at the prison, at Moyamensing? And I look them in the face, I give them my best polite grin, and I tell them, listen, if the material that I was given in those tackle boxes is true, he would have had to have escaped to death, and we can one day prove it. All we have to do is I have to get a supporter behind me with enough money, and it's expensive, to dig up the concrete that he was buried in. We know exactly where it is. We separate the concrete, we pull the remains out, I surrender tissue, and they do a DNA analysis, and the world will know within a period of a few months. I thought it was a very quick process when I first got into this. It's not. It'll take a while, but the world will know absolutely whether he was hung that day or not. And I think, to me, that is just one of the great things about this story. I'm not another author saying I believe I know who Jack the Ripper is, and it could have been a woman, the last book that came out that said it was Jill Ripper. I get to prove these things based on absolute evidence eventually, and to me, that's very exciting.
We have two questions, and I want to get to them before we lose them. When did he start building his hotel? Was it in the summer of 1888? Would he have gone to England and leave the building of his hotel to contractors, seeing as he changed them so often?
Great question. Shows that one of your listeners is very educated in the subject. He bought the property that he built the hotel on in July of 88. They did not start building until the spring of 89. It was in March or April, and that's when you go back and research how building was done in Chicago. And Mo, you know the weather back there. You can't start building a motel that's going to take a long period of time before the winter comes. You have to wait until the winter clear, and then you have to work as fast as you can through the spring and summer before you get to the next winter. They wouldn't have started in the fall of 88, and when we went back and checked the records, there was no construction.
Right. And here's another question. Is it fact that Holmes verified victims were tortured alive or killed efficiently to sell the cadavers as a business enterprise? And I'm going to throw something into that question, too. It's never been clarified that he was doing this out of sexual deviant, right?
There has never been any evidence that he was a sexual deviant. He had hundreds of mistresses, but not one case of rape. I don't know what that means psychologically. I don't know if there's any doctors out there that want to call in, but this is one of the rarest cases where a serial killer was not involved in the sexual side of it as well. Holmes never had to with women. One of the examples I give, I was on TV the other day, and we were discussing this power he had over women. When the verdict came down, and this was written about by the New York Times reporter, I'm not making this up, when the verdict came down that he was to be hung by the neck until dead, as they led him out of the courtroom, 6 women behind him stood up and were bawling tears, and it's in the New York Times report. He had this power, this hypnosis, I don't know what you call it, but women, a lot of women loved Holmes. He did not have to go into deviancy. Now, as far as it's a great question, too. There is no testimony, there is no evidence about the torture that occurred in that basement. Let's face it, if you were down there and you saw torture and death being committed by this doctor, you probably weren't long for the world.
No.
I don't know how that would have worked out so well. And there were racks. They found the Chicago police talked about torture racks where you actually, Holmes thought that he could elongate a woman, breed her, and then have babies that grew to be taller. That was one of his theories. They found that rack down there. They also found that he was selling, the skeletons that he would strip from the bodies to some of the medical schools around America, as well as some of the organs. So your caller's question is a great one, and the answer is no. There is no proof that actual torture occurred.
We're going to go to break in a minute, but I've read, and like I said, I've been researching this for weeks now, and I have a nosebleed from it, but I've read that it appears he enjoyed getting people to decide what they were willing to sacrifice to survive. No one that he got involved with survived to testify against him, right?
He let my great-great-grandmother live when it was before him. When she refused him a divorce, he let her live. So there were women that he looked the other way, so to speak, for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're going to go to break, and the next song, I believe, is going to be by the Police, and it's Murdered by the Numbers. But before that, I've got a little commercial back, and this is a kickback from the 1960s, and Spanky and our gang, and I think you're really going to enjoy it. So listen close, because I chuckle every time I hear it. And we'll be right back with Jeff Mudgett, who has written the book Bloodstains, which is on Amazon.com. And can they get signed books from your site?
No, I only do signed books at readings or conferences. I don't do any more signed books over the site.
Right.
But I tell you what, our site has all my schedule and where I'll be over the next couple of months. And my agent has me traveling quite a bit. So if they're interested in a signed book, they can find one.
Okay, cool. And we'll be right back. This is GameCon Radio, rocking your world. Welcome back to Mo Banshee's Lair, Visionary Talk Radio, and our very special guest tonight is Jeff Mudgett, the author of Bloodstains. Bloodstains is a book that you can find www.bloodstainsthebook.com. It is about the American serial killer H.H. Mudgett. It is written by Jeff, and it turns out Jeff is directly related to him. And in the book, there's a, oh, good grief, there it is. I'm looking for it. There, on the front of the page, it's on the cover, it says, "I was born with the devil in me. I could not help the fact that I was a murderer, no more than the poet can help the inspiration to sing. I was born with the evil one standing as my sponsor beside the bed where I was ushered into the world, and he has been with me ever since." Dr. H.H. Holmes, Confession, 1896. That says a multiple of things about this man. Comments, Jeff?
I've probably just trampled over a very self-explanatory quote that, like you say, pretty much sums up where his mind was with the things that he did his entire life when he had the brain to have been a great man, possibly curing disease, like a Pasteur or something like that. He had that type of intellect, and this man chose the dark side with that heart of darkness that he said he was born with.
Yeah. And again, the book is on Amazon, and you can find more about it at bloodstainsthebook.com. I really encourage people to
read this book. It's incredible. Now, during the break, you told me that there's a mini series being created based on all this new information that was found out about him.
You know, the story, when I started out, about a year ago now, the book was largely panned. I had some tough reviews. It looked like it was going to be a failure. I didn't quit. It started picking up. Now we're getting, praises from media that it's a masterpiece, things like that, of the human condition and psyche. But all of a sudden, we have some Hollywood interest in the story. We're going to be History Channel. I was just down in Chicago about 3 weeks ago, and they filmed me for their new series, for their new cable channel series about some of the horrible things of American history, and we're going to be their premiere show. They actually went down into the basement with me and filmed the post office where the murder castle was. It's going to be a great show. Then PBS is going to investigate with us a paranormal investigation of that basement. The post office employees believe the basement is haunted. They won't go down into the basement at all. It's not used. Can you imagine that? A United States federal post office, an office building, where parts of it aren't used. They actually turned the burglar alarm systems, the detection systems off because of all the alarms that were going off. And like I said, the employees won't go down. So the PBS people are going to investigate this paranormal, or they're going to film this paranormal investigation of an overnight stay where all these people were tortured and murdered. It's going to be, I got to tell you, the first time, I was the first author that actually went into the basement at the post office. The others had written about it, they had driven by it, but none had gone down into the place where the castle basement was. When I first went down the steps, to the basement, I did not believe in the paranormal. I did not believe in the spirit world. I did not even believe in God. 1 hour later, when I came out, I believed in all three, and I try to describe that in the book. What happened to me down there and the energy I felt. I didn't see, white ghosts flying around or anything like that, but there is definitely an energy down there, and I don't know if you believe in the paranormal or not. But I tell you what, I can't wait for PBS to do that investigation. And then what you mentioned, we've got some interest from the big companies, HBO, Cinemax, and the others, about actually doing a miniseries of H.H. Holmes on trial as Jack the Ripper, using a real judge, a real jury, practicing criminal lawyers, and applying the rules of evidence to the things we have about why we think he was Jack the Ripper. And in between the courtroom drama, we're going to have reenactments of each of the murders in London. And I tell you what, I'm very excited about the possibility for that. And then, of course, Warner Brothers is doing the movie next year with Leonardo DiCaprio, coming out next year, I think. And from what I hear, they're just really excited about the whole process.
Yeah, the post office, the building is no longer standing. There is a United States Post Office there. You're not allowed to go down there. It's closed off. Evidently, some of the original foundation was used to build the post office on. And so there is a wall there that they believe he used as a quick exit or something out of there. I actually, my daytime job is helping people with severe hauntings. So yes, I do know there are spirits, and no, they aren't white sheets running around the place going boo. They're just people who are dead, and bad people die. And they don't always go to Disneyland, to the Haunted Mansion. When bad people die, sometimes they continue to do bad things, which brings me, let's talk a little bit about you, from your letters, your artifacts that were handed down to you, you believe that he did not hang in Philadelphia, and it's not unreasonable to think that he did get away with it because William Hearst gave him a large sum of money, right, for his story?
Oh yeah, he received a large check from Hearst. He gave money to the trial judge, to charity, for certain rules of the court to be overlooked for the hanging and for the handling of the body afterwards. Incredible things. You read the book, so you know that when the body came down from the scaffolding, it was placed in the coffin and immediately filled with concrete.
It still had the hood on it. It still had the hood.
There is argument about the hood. I'm convinced that the hood will be there when we crack open the concrete, but there is argument about the hood. Now, he hired the Pinkerton guards, who were the famous guards at the time. That coffin, the body was filled over with concrete. It was dragged with a mule team to the cemetery where a 10-foot hole had been dug. The concrete coffin was put down in the hole, and that was filled with concrete. Now, no, the thing you have to understand, here's a man who could have cared less what happened to his body after death. He did not believe in any of those things that makes that relevant. And he went to such great extremes. Where else had you heard of these extremes being taken for a body? He went to such great extremes, and with the things that he had done to escape, like there was no pathology after the hanging, which is a violation of Pennsylvania law. So when you talk about all these, put these things together, and then you add up the Holmes curse, this thing that was written about by the great newspapers after the hanging. Anyone that was involved in the arrest, in the trial, in the hanging, that upset him, either died or had terrible misfortune, illness, those type of things. While the trial was ongoing, Holmes could be seen at his chair making a list of names. And to me, all those things, those are the type of things that when I was a practicing lawyer before I got involved in the story and the obsession that we talked about. Those are the type of things, those circumstantial pieces of evidence, which by themselves don't prove anything. But when you add them all up and they start pointing all in the same direction, no, those are the things you've got to take seriously. And that's why, I tell you what, I can't wait for next year when we dig that concrete up. We've already been told that the Natural History Museum and the Smithsonian are going to take possession of the concrete because the body belongs to the government.
Right.
They're going to crack it, which is good, because if I did it and hired people, there would be skeptics calling your show from all over the world who wouldn't believe anything I said. This is great. It's going to be opened by professionals. They'll do it perfectly under laboratory conditions. They'll do the DNA with the best doctors in the world, and we might be able to rewrite history.
It might seem far-fetched to us now that somebody could fake a death in a prison, but and I'm not sure I'm correct in this. I believe I read that William Randolph Hearst's publications paid him $10,000 for his story. That's a lot of money back then. That is millionaire-type money. And so now you get somebody who's going to be executed anyway or is in on a life sentence, and you say, okay, here's the deal. You take my place being hung, and I will send your family $1,000. It's not unreasonable to think that a person that's going to be in there for life might say, okay, I'm going to just rot here anyway, and take your place. And if I understand, most of what I've read is he was let out with the hood already on to be hung. Now, you just think about handing somebody $500, a couple of Pinkerton men, a couple of guards, hand them $500 here, $500 there. That was a lot of money back then, right?
Oh, that was I'm not an expert on economics at the time, but I would imagine that's 6 months' money, Mo.
Sure. So it's not unreasonable to think once he got paid for his story by Hearst, and he's got all this money, he could have buyed his way out of dying and being executed, which would be another reason why he wouldn't want the hood removed, and he wouldn't want anybody to have at his body or do an autopsy, because then they would know it wasn't him.
Well, and you wrote the comments that the reporters made. They actually sent doctors into the cell and wrote about seeing Holmes's face changing in appearance, and they put it on the first page of the New York Times. He started looking like the devil, they said. Right. And when it's just a fascinating subject when you know how Holmes controlled the human psyche and the people around him, and how he played chess with everything he did. Here's a man that planned murders 5-6 years ahead with the murder castle and the World's Fair. He could have handled the people that were in his jail cell before that execution. It would have been it would have been easy for him.
Sure.
And that man, from the minute he knew he was going to lose that trial, he would have started planning, though. He would have started putting his mind to work. And to me, listen, if the artifacts that I have are phony, he's probably in the grave. Mm-hmm. If they're real, if that handwriting is the same, which I've been told it is, there has to be a reason. Mm-hmm. I don't think my grandfather copied the handwriting. I don't think he could have done that. He's the only one that saw those pieces of material. So it's going to be interesting to see. And like I said, it excites me. I don't have to do anything except have the concrete pulled up and do a DNA analysis with my tissue with what's left in the coffin.
Yeah, definitely. There were accounts where it was said that the guards liked him. They obviously, he was a prisoner, but they would do little favors for him, get newspapers so he could follow the investigation when it finally all came out about the castle, because none of this all came out until after he was arrested in Philadelphia. And then they started backtracking, and that's when the murder castle was revealed. Up till then, nobody really knew what was going on the years before, right?
No, he was never tried for any of the murders in the murder castle. The trial turned into counts against him for the murders of the 3 children. But they didn't learn about the murder castle until long after he was supposedly hung.
Okay. And that's, again, it's amazing. And we were talking during the break about this, how he managed to pull all of this horrible murder, and some people think he could have possibly been so prolific that he murdered upwards of 1,000 and more people. And no one caught wind of it, but like you said, he had his Igors that helped him, absolutely, because all you need is money and a poor person, and you can get something done that most people would not do, right?
He was the Dr. Frankenstein, as we discussed. He had Igors helping him. Men loved this man. I don't know why, like we discussed, I don't know how that works, why the human psyche would do that for such a horrible thing. I don't know why women would love a monster like this. But there's no doubt, it was, as you mentioned, when he was in the jail cell, the warden warned all of the guards not to get close to this man. It was just like in the movie The Silence of the Lambs.
Right.
They told those guards, stay away from this man. He will end up controlling how you think.
Yeah.
And as you read my book and how I describe what I think happened, that's exactly what occurred.
He was charismatic, and he was also a very nice-looking man by the day standards. He, he knew how to keep himself. He knew, he obviously knew how to win people's trust and gain it. He was the perfect con man, and everything I've read it points that he was one of these people. You know, we teach our children that bad people are ugly and bad people are this, but what's his name? Ted Bundy was a good-looking guy. He managed to get these girls to trust him, and Holmes was, for the day, a good-looking guy, well-kept, money. He had everything to offer a girl. And so getting victims was not a big, huge problem for him. So it's really an amazing thing that he did. And the Holmes curse we alluded to, that was that anybody who he felt did him wrong during the court case, they died mysteriously without rhyme or reason. They just seemed to start keeling over, right?
Many of them died. Some of them grew ill. Many had terrible misfortune and bad luck. Strange events. I have a friend in Chicago that ran the list down, and he thinks he can come up with a list of 40 people that had something to do with either the arrest, the trial, or the execution that had this home curse visited upon them, and which was written by the New York Times and the Chicago papers as one of the strange events in American current events after he was allegedly hung. It's a fascinating subject, probably one that a book should be written on just by itself.
Right. It took him 15 minutes to whoever was hung. That said it took him almost 15 minutes before he was declared dead, right?
That one's a difficult no. I've had so many different stories about how the hanging actually happened and the different facts involved. I'm a little bit leery now to state I know what occurred because, like I say, there's so many different aspects of the hanging, and whether the first time or they dropped him a second time or whether the neck didn't break, how that worked. But I tell you, it's more, I tell you what, it starts to feel to me more like Holmes was controlling the confusion even that was written after. So I'm a little bit leery to get into stating that I know what happened at the hanging.
You know what it reminds me of when I read about his hanging? The new Sherlock Holmes with, what's his name, that actor? Downey. Robert Downey Jr.,
Downey.
Where the guy is in the prison and he's talking to them and he bribes the guard and they put the hoist on him and all, and it appears that he's hung, but he really wasn't hung. Have you seen the new Sherlock Holmes with Robert Downey Jr.?
No, but it sounds like I should.
Yeah, the hanging scene for the bad guy, it's amazing. When he asks Holmes to go to the prison as a last request, and of course Watson has to declare him dead, and then he dies, and it all just kind of makes you realize that money talks and nobody walks. We're going to go to break. And the last song tonight is going to be Spanky and Our Gang. And let me bring it up so I can remember. It's Yesterday's Rain, which happens to be an incredible song by them. They were a group in the 60s, and they did a wonderful job on this song. It's got a lot of singing, harmonization, and I really liked it. It's called Yesterday's Rain. And when we come back, we're going to finish up with our guest tonight, Jeff Mudgett, who has written a book called Bloodstains, and you can get it on Amazon. It's a Kindle thing, too. You can get it as a Kindle, and then you can buy the paperback one too. It's you've got to read it. I don't want to give the story away, but this is a lot of conscious wrestling, trying to come to terms with finding out a very dark secret in your family's history, and then what to do with it and how to process it all, and going through all of that emotion, which had to be kind of like a roller coaster. We'll be right back. This is GameCon Radio, and we are rocking your world tonight with Jeff Mudgett.
You are listening to GameCon Radio.
Yes? Hi, I'm here for the New York Ghost Tour. Sorry, we're closed. But you can come back next week. Next week? Forget that. I'll just go check out another place. Trust me, there's no place half as interesting as ours, dear. That's so not true. What about the Shanley Hotel in Napanock? Once you've been to one haunted hotel, you've been to them all. Not like this place. The Shanley Hotel dates back to 1845, and since then it's been a hotspot for paranormal activity. Mysterious music, smells, whistling, doors opening, footsteps. Almost everything you can imagine has been experienced at that hotel. It's open to the public? Absolutely. Sal and Cindy, the owners of the hotel, welcome people for regular stays or investigations, and their rates are beyond reasonable. They even offer workshops and in-house psychics. How did you learn about this place? By visiting www.shanleyhotel.com. You can get history, investigation info, and much more. Thanks, I think I will. Just don't tell any of our customers. Your secret's safe with me. It's not like anyone can hear it.
Welcome back to Mo Banshee's Lair, Visionary Talk Radio on GameConRadio.com. Again, I'd like to remind everybody that we have a schedule page. GameCon Radio plays music 24/7. You can always find great music. You just tune us in and then minimize them, go about your business on the computer, and you're going to hear some of the best music there is out there. There's lots of shows, different types of shows. I think there's something for everybody. And our guest tonight is Jeff Mudgett, who has written Bloodstains, a book that you can find on Amazon.com, but he also has a site that is bloodstainsthebook.com, and it talks about the book. The book is about H.H. Holmes, who is, in some people's opinions, the most prolific and one of the first serial killers in the United States. And we're going to go let Jeff kind of synopsis what it is he's hoping people will take away from this book that he's written. But I did want to say that you believe that he escaped the hangman's noose, and that you've tracked down his grave and everything. Did it give you any kind of closure to find that?
Actually, when and I don't want to give away the conclusion of the book, but there is a large amount of closure for me and how the story ends. I come out on the good side, to put it lightly, and it's because of my discovery that the man that I hated as a young boy, my grandfather, when I learned what he went through having been the grandson of this man, which is multiplied 100 times more than the degree to which I'm connected, when you really think about it, and how he had to suffer through life raising a family and protecting them from the things. Well, let's face it, not only was he worried about monsters, he was worried about the monster inside himself, Mo, because we all wake up one day, we all are driving a car, we all have anger, and those things that comes out of you, that, oh, I could kill that guy right now. You can't think those things anymore. That's what happened to me when I started realizing where I had come from. And every time you do, every time you have a temper tantrum, every time you have some type of slightly psychotic mannerism, which we all do, and anyone can deny it all they want, we all do.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, now it's defined. Now I know where it came from, and it's not a joke. It's not like a cartoon anymore. This is the worst. So your life and the way you live it becomes completely different. And that's what I wanted the book to be about, how you go about changing. That one day in my life, I had to change my entire life and how I thought about life and the people around me.
Yeah, your grandfather, and we don't want to give away what went down in the book because I definitely think it is a great read. But he pointed at you at a dinner table, and just say yes or no. Are you comfortable that you understood what he was saying to you at that moment?
No, that's what the whole book's about. I couldn't figure out why there's a room of 15 people, why he's pointing at me. And I tried to explain it in the book, too, that my grandmother couldn't figure out why he was pointing at me. Here's a man that maybe said 2 sentences to me my entire life, and he's pointing at me while he discusses that we're related to the most evil man that ever lived. I had no idea. No?
Right. And what do you want to take? What are you hoping for this book to do?
You know, what's becoming a fascination for me, Mo, is you know that over 150 million people in our country have, at one time in their lives or not, had a spiritual experience. I don't know if that means ghosts. I don't know if it means what. They've had some type of experience. They took a Gallup poll on this. Over 150 million, almost half of everyone that lives in our country has had one of these experiences. I'm becoming fascinated with the opportunity to prove there is something there. And what I find the most compelling is that thing that Einstein once said, Mo, and I know you know this. Energy does not die in our planet. Energy does not die in our life. When a human being dies, that energy has to go somewhere that was in our body. I'm convinced that energy, that thing that Einstein was talking about, is what all of us have had in one of those spiritual experiences. Whether it can ever be proven, whether it can ever be put on film or audio, I don't know, the people that are trying to put it electronically and prove it. But I'd like to see us all take a little bit more honest look at that thing. Well, let's face it, it's like water. Water never dies on our planet. The only water that dies on our planet is the stuff that's taken out with a spaceship past the atmosphere. The other stuff's all here. It just regenerates. That energy regenerates too. And I think that life, after a death of the body, is here. And I'd like to work on trying to see how we can prove that still exists. And I tell you what, I'm looking forward to doing it on this investigation we have coming up in the basement of the murder castle.
Well, I got to tell you, I would love to be there because that's incredible. Yes, I do know what you're talking about. I've had cases, and the team. I'm as old as dirt, so the team are all young guys and gals and all. And when I tried to explain to them the energy on one case, Brian came into me from one room, and he says, "You're not going to believe what just happened to me." And it's like, I try to explain people, it feels like a TENS unit being placed on your skin. You know, have you ever had a TENS unit? And there's that incredible energy, and it's just like somebody laying a bare wire on your skin and just giving you a light charge, and it's that kind of thing. And I told him, I says, "Wait, I know you think that I'm a fraud because of all the crap you see on TV." I says, "Let me explain to you what happened, because I was in there 15 minutes ago." And when I said it, he says, "Yes, that's exactly what happened." But, you know, like I say, not everybody goes to Disney World when they die. Bad people live, bad people die. And there's, I don't know why God doesn't make them all leave, but evidently some bad people stay behind, and in spirit, they're still bad people. They don't have to be nice people because they're dead, you know? It's an incredible story. Like I said, if my husband came to me and said to me, "Hey, guess what?
I'd say, shut up. You know, just don't tell anybody about it. You know, the kids have enough to cope with. I applaud you for wanting to get the truth. That's basically what I'm seeing in you. You want the truth. You want to know who and why. And am I oversimplifying it?
No, you're not. And there is a part of me that I would have needed to have tried to prove the Earth wasn't flat as well. That's in me. And I think there's a part of that in trying to prove some of that energy we just talked about in the paranormal. But I tell you, the other thing that someone can take from my book, and this is what I'm hearing from my readers, is that we all have a heart of darkness in us. There is a piece in all of us that under the proper circumstances, we could all act improperly unless we controlled it. The way you control it is learning from the ones that were the worst. And I think this man, and I don't know why he hasn't been yet, but this man, my great-great-grandfather, needs to be studied by mankind more. And I think anyone that takes my book, reads it with that perspective, know what the worst we could possibly be. This is the extreme condition. If we all tried to learn what that was, it will allow us to control those things within all of us, to know how to be better human beings in our society. And I really do believe that, and I'm hoping that my book and the study of this man will allow that to happen.
Mm-hmm. You know that show on TV, Breaking Bad? It only takes the right circumstances and a moment, just a moment of anger, what they call blind rage, and you don't know really what you're capable of doing, really.
You know what, Mo, that was a brilliant comparison. That Breaking Bad and that moment within all of us that we're capable of. You're exactly right. I love that show too.
Yeah, it only takes a moment. I mean, you hear about somebody caused the death of a child, and the child's father, lashes out in that moment. There's just that split second that can define you for the rest of your life. But in your great-great-grandfather's case, I don't know what drove him. I don't know if it was a macabre thirst for knowledge to see what makes it tick, or what, but whatever drove him, he was good at it, and people trusted him, and he got away with it for a long, long time.
Well, I think we're going to prove, Mo, that he got away with it for a lot longer than history has written. We'll see about that. But you're right, and that's the thing where here's a man, and we discussed it already, but here's a man that could have been whatever he wanted. He had that brain. It was so far past anyone else around him. He could have been something incredible. Why would something like that choose the dark side? I'd love for doctors, I'd love for all the experts on mental illness and those things to try to take the example of H.H. Holmes and figure out why someone would do that. I think if we figured that out, Mo, we might solve a lot of the problems we have.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess there's a slew of answers there, but we're out of time. I want to thank you so much for coming on. This has been an interesting discussion. Thank you so much for opening up. And again, the book is Bloodstains, and it is about the worst serial killer in American history, as far as I can tell, because this guy got away with murder for a long time. Nobody suspected this guy. He was prolific. He got away with, he actually sold the skeletons of his victims to medical schools and was getting paid to be a serial killer. I mean, how brilliant is that? I want to thank you for coming on. And will you come back and visit us when you write your next book?
I would love to. I've got a sequel about halfway finished, and I'm working on another book. I want to see if I can write, Mo, without having to be about H.H. Holmes, and I've got a book about a modern-day pirate and Spanish gold on the California coast.
Right. And just for everybody's information, Jeff has never studied serial murderers. He's never written about serial killers or anything like that. So this is not like another, he's just going down the list of serial killers and trying to make them fit into his world. This is actually someone that is proven to be family, and it's a dark journey, and I think you kept a good searchlight on it so you didn't get lost, and kudos to you for that.
Thank you very much, Mo.
All you have to do is hang up, and we'll be done. And like I said, it'll be on podcast, and it'll also be on Facebook, so you can download it off the Podomatic, and I'll be giving you the links when everything is up. Probably by tomorrow morning, I'll be able to give you the links and get it all up. Thank you so much for coming on.
Hey, Mo, it was a pleasure. And one final comment. This book is not for children, so I would ask parents not to allow children to read the book.
No, it is not vulgar either. I know somebody sent me a book from hell that was written by one of these ghost hunters from a TV show, and it was vulgar. It was just cashing in on horror and vulgarness. And this book is not a vulgar book, so I want everybody to know that too. God bless you. Okay, good night. Next week, we are going to have two of my favorite people on. Let me see if I can find my scheduled book, because I don't know what happened to it. My desk is a mess at this point. I'm pretty sure it's going to be Tony and Barb Saletti, but again, I can't find my book anywhere. And they're going to be on, and they're going to be talking about the Lazaretto. Long before, here it is, yes, it's Barb and Tony Saletti. They are members of the Lazaretto Society. The Lazaretto is in Philadelphia. Long before there was Ellis Island, there was the Lazaretto. It was a place for people to be quarantined and brought ashore and checked out before they came on and gave everybody smallpox and everything else. And this is an incredible historical place. It's near Fort Mifflin, a fort that I absolutely adore. And they've just found one of our first airstrips that were in Philadelphia. They're used for the military on the same premises as the Lazaretto. So it's an extremely historical place. It's important. I understand people have heard and seen things there which they can't explain. On the 31st, I'm going to go on vacation. I'm going to take a week off, so everybody enjoy it. August 7th, we're going to have Paula J. Kaplan. She is a psychiatrist who has written a book called When Jane and Johnny Come Marching Home, and it's about the plight of our veterans coming home and not being able to maintain relationships with their family and becoming homeless, and the different things that they have to go through. On the 14th, we have a surprise guest. It's going to be a real murder mystery. We're going to be asking people to help us figure out who murdered somebody. It's a cold case. We're going to have a police detective on, and he is active in the case. So I can't give you any more information than that, but on the 14th, we're going to try to solve a real-life cold case. And then on the 21st, anybody who watched Old Yeller, watched Invaders from Mars, watched old movies where kids were used, knows who Beverly Washburn was.
a great actress. She's going to be on and talk to us about Hollywood and working there as a child. And I've talked to her, and I'm going to meet her this coming weekend. She is an absolutely gorgeous woman, full of life. So I think you're all going to enjoy that. So with that, I am going to ask everybody to please remember the heat is going to, it's going to be here for another month and a half at least. We are under a heat wave. Make sure you check on children, check on your elderly. They will sit there and say, oh, I'm okay, nothing's wrong, I can take it. I used to sit through 100 degrees when I was a child. They're not children anymore. And animals cannot stay out in the heat where it's 100 degrees without shade. I was very upset to hear that there are ranches out in the Midwest where they are not obligated to make sure that their horses have any kind of shade. It's not a requirement by the SPCA, and I can't imagine that. But somebody was asking about reporting someone. You know, these are the people I want to take and tie out like the Indians used to do, and tie them out on an anthill and say, now you deal with the heat and see what happens to you. Because animals cannot deal with heat any better than we can. They need shelter from heat, they need shade, they need shelter from cold, they need adequate water, clean water, they need food. If you're not going to take care of them, call the ASPCA and give them up. But then please don't get another animal. So everybody be mindful of the heat. Animals do not belong in a car if you're not in it with them. They do not. Your children don't belong in cars while you're running into 7-Eleven. It's dangerous, and cars turn into an oven. So please, if you see somebody with an animal in a car and nobody's around, I don't care if it's in the shade or not, call the police. It's 90 degrees out there. Within 10 minutes, it's going to be an oven in there, and that animal or child is going to expire. And with that, I want to thank everybody for listening. I want to thank our guest, Jeff Mudgett, for being on tonight. This was a very serious book. It's not a pleasant subject, a serial murder. We're talking about real lives. This guy could have killed up to 1,000 people, and he didn't do it pleasantly. But it's a book worth reading. I think that everybody's going to walk away from it and think about their own anger issues and about controlling them. So with that, I want to thank you all for listening. God bless you all. I love you all. Be safe out there. We're in this together. Night-night.
Thank you for visiting me at my lair. Mobanshee Lair is broadcast live on Tuesday evenings at 10 p.m. Eastern, 9 p.m. Central, 8 p.m. Mountain, 7 p.m. Pacific, and in the UK, 3 a.m. Wednesday mornings on www.gameconradio.com. You can listen to our recent recordings on Podomatic/Mobanshee. You can contact me at www.asylumsgate.com. Again, thank you for listening. God bless you and yours, and have a very cool day.
See us redefine how we attach labels to men like him with these psychopath and sociopath names, which don't do a very good job of defining or describing, a monster like this. This man was evil. He enjoyed what he did. He had a choice, and he chose the path we all would consider the dark one every single time.
Let's just back up, and you explain in your words who he was. H.H.
Well, he was right. He grew up. He was born Herman Webster Mudgett in New Hampshire, Wilmington, New Hampshire. He had a nice family. There was no childhood rapes or any of those things.
And they weren't necessarily rich, but they were well off.
They fed him well. He had clothes. He went to good schools. Those type of things. He wasn't lacking. He married a beautiful young lady who also, family had money. They had a child, which was my great-grandfather. He grew bored with his life and went to the University of Michigan Medical School, where he was top of his class. I always people think, why would someone like that go to medical school when those schools are for, curing ill and sickness and decreasing pain? I always think he went to those places to enable him to increase all those things instead.
Right.
He knew exactly what he was doing, Mo, when he went to medical school, and he enjoyed working on the cadavers. He enjoyed the lessons and the teachings that he knew would enable him to exceed at his chosen profession in life.
Right. He was perfecting it.
Exactly, and when you really think of it, and we'll get into it later, how I'll prove how he used those techniques and skills that he learned at medical school with the knife and the scalpel. Mm-hmm. When you think of it, it's exactly the right place for a man with his desires to have gone.
Yeah, and the thing that is so disturbing with this case is that for years, he was a con man, and he did stuff, he pissed people off, but the society was unaware of anything he was doing until he got nailed in Philadelphia for the swindle, right? Fraud.
Well, we're jumping a little ahead, but you're right. He was arrested for a life insurance fraud, which led the police into a murder of 3 small children in Indiana and Toronto.
But until then, he was. Everybody thought he was okay. He's just a weirdo, right?
No. I mean, this was the local doctor. The neighborhood loved having this doctor in the neighborhood who would greet them on their way home from work.
And you're stuck out in the cold. Alcohol is no good. High sugar drinks are not a good thing. These things deplete your body of water, and you got to keep replacing your water. So energy drinks, a lot of water. Make sure you're checking the elderly, animals, children. Make sure everybody is safe. A lot of towns are opening cooling stations, but a lot of towns have libraries with air conditioning. They're open from like 9 in the morning till 9 at night. You can go sit in there and, relax and read a book and cool off. Also, but you have to be safe, a cool bathtub of water. You fill the tub up with water, go sit in it for a little while, cool down, close the door so children and pets are not going to get in there and you're not going to have an accident. Go back in when you start getting very heated up. And fans really do help air conditioners work more efficiently. You put a fan on, it rotates the air so the cooling air doesn't just stay in one direction, so it maximizes your air conditioning. Please, we all want to make it through these heat waves. We all want to make sure everybody is safe. And I'm reading a lot about people saying they see animals locked in cars and they want to break the windows open and this and that. And the next thing, if you see an animal in the car alone in the heat, I don't care if it's in the shade or not, call the police and report it. The police will open the door up, they will find out where the owner is, and they will take care of everything. You don't have to go to jail, you don't have to get in trouble. So that's my thing for today. I hope everybody tries to stay cool and all of that. Our guest tonight is Jeff Mudgett, who has he has a dubious honor of having a pedigree that I don't think anybody in the world would want. He has discovered he is the great-great-grandson of H.H. Holmes, Herman Mudgett, who built the hotel during the Chicago's World's Fair in 1993, and it became known as the murder capital of Chicago, or the murder castle of Chicago. Jeff, welcome to the lair.
Well, thank you, Mo. It's an honor, and I've been looking forward to it all week.
Did I say 1993? Sorry, 1893. There's so much to ask, and you've done a lot of trying to explain things. And one thing about sociopaths or psychopaths, whatever you choose to call them, is they show no remorse, they show no empathy for others, and they're not necessarily they're not necessarily crazy in the clinical sense. They're more evil. Would you agree with that?
Well said. My great grandfather, Herman Mudgett, H.H. Holmes, was not crazy in the least. He was a genius, a brilliant man who enjoyed murder. One of the things, Mo, I've set out as a goal in writing the book and doing the shows like this and talks is that I'd like to...
He started looking around, and she became upset that some of the people were not getting a clear view of the stage, and she wouldn't perform until they started moving chairs and tables so that everybody got a really good look at her. And what a show she put on. She broke out in 1952 with a song, It Wasn't God Who Made Honky Tonk Angels. And she didn't write it, but the reason she recorded it was because there was a song out by a male country artist who blamed a honky-tonk angel for destroying his marriage and stuff. So in retaliation, she did a very bold thing and recorded It Wasn't God Who Made Honky-Tonk Angels and kind of put him right where he belongs. So we're going to do a little tribute to her tonight, and during our first break, we will be playing It Wasn't God Who Made Honky-Tonk Angels. Then we have a kind of funny bit by Spanky and Our Gang, which was a 60s group called Commercial. I think you're all going to like it. And the reason I picked that is this is going to be a very dark subject. So we want to keep it a little lighter so everybody enjoys it. So if for nothing else, hang around for the commercial because you're really going to enjoy it. And then Murder by Numbers by Police and Yesterday's Rain by Spanky and the Gang. So they're the music tonight, and I picked it specifically to kind of lighten the mood and that. Crazy but news, you know that, I'm going to do it, so just brace yourselves. Remember the two kids that, it was all over YouTube, they were doing that Miami zombie attack prank. And they were dressing like zombies and attacking people and scaring the daylights out of them. Well, they decided to try another one. Jonathan Bangus, 20, evidently he tried to play a fake bomb hoax thing on this guy, and the guy did not take it well. He called it Russian hitman prank. It went really wrong, and the guy that they were trying to scare, because they just picked random people out, he evidently beat the daylights out of them. And I say good. Now, this 20-year-old said that he apologized to this Mr. Brown, who was 51, who got told he had a pipe bomb in his car and everything. But Mr. Brown didn't accept it, and the kid is complaining. He attacked me and my camera guy. He threw me on the floor, then he threw my guy on the floor. I was just screaming back, I'm sorry. Maybe you shouldn't do nasty things like that. If you don't do stupid things like that, maybe you won't get beat up by 51-year-old people. Good for them. I'm glad they got a little bit of their own back. Florida Pizza Hut was robbed. A very stocky, barefoot guy in a ball cap broke into a Pizza Hut, smashing the window, and on the camera they could see he was looking for cash. He didn't find any, so he went into the refrigerator and stole a few boxes of shredded cheese. Well, at least he can sell it or eat it or something. I guess that the thing was he needed food or he needed money for food. So if they didn't have money, he got food. But those are two things that happened in Florida this week. I found this, and I know we have a lot of people out in the country who listen to us. Ben Van Loon is a dairy cow farmer out in Wisconsin, Van Loon Dairy Farm. He has been ordering water beds for his cows to rest on. And the reason he said he's doing it is because straw and like wood shavings and all breed bacteria, and then a cow goes down and is down for a few weeks or maybe even a few months. And he says this way they don't get as much bacteria on them, and they're happier. Their aches and their pains, they're sitting on this water bed, which is not filled like a traditional water bed. It only has, maybe an inch or two of water. But the thing is, it takes a little bit of the oomph out of the ground and impact. So he's a brilliant young man. He and his brothers came up with this, and they're very young. They look to be between 20 and 30, the group of them. So kudos to them for being entrepreneurs and thinking this up. Fort Wayne, Indiana, a father has pleaded guilty to 4 charges related to an incident in which he strapped 4 kids to his hood of his car. The Journal Gazette out there reported 29-year-old Aaron Stefanski pleaded guilty to 3 counts of child neglect and driving while intoxicated. He said he used yellow toe straps and secured 4 children, 3 of them are his own, to the hood of a white sedan and drove them around. And when he got stopped, he said he was only going to drive around the corner. If you've got to use a toe strap to restrain anybody, it's probably not a good idea. So he's probably going to go to jail for a few years, and the children have been released to family members. I think he needs to reassess his what's a good time. Buy him a swing, guy. Get them a swing, get them a sliding pond, strap them into the car. Take them to Great Adventure, for God's sake. Take them to Six Flags. People never cease to amaze me on how stupid they are. I want to remind everybody, and I do this every week, and I'm starting to feel like, a prophet in the wilderness. This is our 4th heat wave this summer coming down, and it's not backing off without a fight. So if you are going to do gardening, if you're going to do yard work, if you're going to try to walk, that kind of thing, the best time to do it is early in the morning or late in the evening when it's cooler. Early in the morning, you have the advantage of it being cooler and the temperature dropping during the morning, whereas in the evening, I find we're still trying, everything is hot. The pavement's hot, the ground's hot, even though the sun's going down, everything is still hot. So I like to do that kind of thing in the morning. But also, please remember to keep hydrated, always rehydrate. And alcohol is a very bad thing when the temperatures are high. And when
The opinions and views expressed in the following presentation do not necessarily reflect those of GameCon Radio or its affiliates.
Mo Banshee's Lair, Missionary Talk Radio on GameConRadio.com. We rock your world.
We're on. Good evening and welcome to Mo Banshee Slayer, Visionary Talk Radio on GameCon Radio. I want to welcome people in the chat and people listening on, the radio and all of that. Welcome. I just want to point out that we, on GameCon Radio, there is music 24/7. No matter what time of day you come, there will be, music playing, and a little buffer clearing up. Okay. And we have a schedule page. And on the schedule page, you can find a list of great shows that are on. And you really, if you have a special thing you like, you're going to find it. And on Saturday nights, Dr. Lester has one of my favorite shows. It's classic radio shows from way back when. And they're murder mysteries, and they star all the greats. Vincent Price, all of the big actors of the time did these radio shows, these mysteries, The Shadow Knows, all of this. And so please check out the schedule show, and I'm sure you're going to really love what you find there. I'm having some trouble. There it is. I have some sad news, and a lot of people don't remember Kitty Wells. Kitty Wells was the lady of country music. She was before Loretta Lynn. She was one of the original country queens of music. She passed away yesterday at the age of 92. And Teddy and I, one of the first times we went out together was to a little roadhouse down by Lakehurst Experimental Base. And there was Kitty Wells performing live. And I remember in the show, they had sold so many tickets, and she